guys, and welcome to my new video, and today we're looking at Restoration Druids in Dragonflight Beta. And you might say, finally MadSkillz, there's been some changes to Resto Druid because a lot of people have forgotten or kind of gave up hope on whether Blizzard is going to remember Druids or not, because there has been very few changes in terms of the initial talent releases back in Dragonflight Alpha. And before we're gonna go and look at the talents, my overall thought and feels about Druid in Dragonflight Beta in terms of dungeons, in terms of synergies, I want to talk or summarize Druid in very few sentences. Druid for many expansions, or in terms of the overall revamp of a class or the lack of revamp, it's very evident. There hasn't been a huge amount of changes to Resto Druid in Dragonflight. If you really enjoy Resto Druid in Shadowlands and there's some Mythic Plus, if you enjoy the Adaptive Swarm gameplay, if you enjoy the Convoke the Spirits gameplay in raid situations, you're going to feel right at home when it comes to Dragonflight, when it comes to playing Resto Druid, because they're kind of merging a lot of the abilities or giving you more options in terms of picking up multiple abilities that you couldn't before. And they're also, and we'll talk about it in the talent section, they're kind of adding this life bloom emphasis, and we're going to talk about this build as well. But again, guys, keep in mind, this is beta, anything can change. We're not looking at theory crafting, we're just looking at the design and feel of the class. Let's go and get started with some of the talents. And as you can see, this is my Resto Druid right now in terms of the talent build that I've been testing. Don't look at these talents, these are only level 60. You're going to get a lot more nodes in the future. So in terms of class tree, there hasn't been a huge amount of changes here. I still think the class tree gives you a decent amount of choice. I think Heart of the Wild is going to be popular build in Mythic Plus, unless it's going to change significantly in terms of spell power. But again, it is a long cooldown, it has been used in Shadowlands. And then you have a new ability in terms of Nature's Vigil, and this is a way shorter cooldown. The way I'm going to explain this, Nature's Vigil is the lazy man's Heart of the Wild. And Heart of the Wild is this long cooldown. You have to really think about the times to use. The biggest misuse of Heart of the Wild in a lot of the keys in Shadowlands is the fact that you press Heart of the Wild, you want to go into your Feral Affinity or whatever affinity and start DPSing, but people need damage or people need healing, and all of a sudden you have to swap out of the Feral Affinity or whatever affinity, and then you have to heal and you waste the cooldown. And all of a sudden it feels really bad. And I think Blizzard has thought about this, and they were like, what about the people who don't want to go into affinities? What about the people who want to do the bare minimum type of healing or damage or whatever? And Nature's Vigil fits into it so well. Before I'm going to demonstrate it fully, Nature's Vigil, for 30 seconds, all single target healing also damages nearby enemy targets for 20% of the healing done. So if I just have a couple of hots on myself and things like that and activate Nature's Vigil, you can see here that the closest enemy is getting damage. If I move here, this enemy is going to be damaged. If I move here, this enemy is going to be damaged. And it is basically a bare minimum in terms of trying to provide extra DPS, because it requires no effort. It requires very little effort. You press it. Again, the cooldown is relatively short, so you can use it like every second pack or something along those lines. And you don't have to go into Feral Affinity. You don't have to go into any affinities. You don't have to provide a good uptime of your Heart of the Wild. You don't have to worry about any of this. And this is just to showcase, again, the difference between something like Heart of the Wild versus Nature's Vigil. I'm not saying these are going to be the main choices, because, for example, you might not need Innervate in Mythic Plus content unless you're doing really high tyrannical keys. And keep in mind, guys, a lot of times I'm referring to Feral Affinity, Boomkin Affinity, because I'm so used to referring to those terms in Shadowlands, but there's no such thing in Dragonflight. You can get Moonkin form if you want and pick up Star Surge. You can go and improve your Feral form with a bunch of other nodes. And again, you're going to get the benefit of those forms when you're pressing Heart of the Wild. So you get a lot of fluency in the gameplay, but what's yet to be known is balancing and which form is going to be the best. For example, you could have situations, and I'm not saying this is going to be the way to go, but you could spec into Convoke and you want to deal damage, and you might be forced into getting Moonkin form because it's going to deal a lot of damage with Convoke. Or for example, if you can't spec into Convoke, you might be better putting in nodes in the left side for your Feral form. There could be possibilities like this, and we're not gonna know until the very last couple of weeks when the expansion is about to get launched and Blizzard is going to leave the last finishing touches to spell coefficients and spell power. But there is possibility of having these different builds emerging, because there is a lot more fluency in terms of which form to pick up and which form to use, especially with spells like Convoke, and improved Convoke kind of nodes. So now let's go to the spec tree, and there's been some significant improvements made to this tree. You can see here, you can actually see the power of the bottom layers here. The fact that you can pick up things like Convoke, Adaptive Swarm, Flourish, it's just insane. There's nothing wrong with Druid Tree in terms of the power, because a lot of the abilities that Druid has, they're really powerful cooldowns that you can chain and combine in different situations, which makes Resto Druid really fun to play, especially in Shadowlands where you have Feral Affinity, which in my opinion is one of the most fun healers when you have to combine Feral Affinity, bleeds, dots and things like that, and go back into your healing and in terms of maintaining your hots and maintaining your healing at the same time. I think it's a really fun combo, and I don't think that should be changed. And I think Blizzard kind of agrees with that, because they're not doing anything really drastic in terms of changing your gameplay. The main thing about the class tree is the fact that you don't have to invest a bunch of points in Stonebark and Ironbark and all those things in order to pick up Power of the Archdruid, aka Memory of the Mother Tree. Makes sense. You shouldn't have to invest into a single target D or ability to get this. And that was an obvious fix. And besides that, there's been some new talents and some brand new talents being added. So some of the new talents, Nurturing Dormancy. If you read this, if you're a Legion baby, if you're a Legion Resto Druid who loved playing Resto Druid in Legion, you know exactly what this is. This is Amator's Wisdom. This is one of the really popular legendaries in Legion, which made your rejuve uptime insane. Like, when the rejuvenation heals a full target, the duration is increased by 3 seconds up to a maximum total increase of 9 seconds per cast, which actually means that if you pick up things like improved rejuvenation, which you should, increases rejuvenation's duration is increased by 3 seconds, you also can have germination, and germination doesn't only allow you to apply multiple rejuvenations on the same target, but rejuvenation's duration is also increased. And then if you pick up this, which is Amator's Wisdom basically, you're looking at, like, I don't know, an uptime of like 26-second rejuves if the person is full HP. So this is wild. Rejuve or pre-hotting is going to be way easier in Dragonflight if this is going to persist. The fact that you can pre-hot earlier, and it's going to make Resto Druid ramps a lot easier or harder to mess up, which is a good thing. And we'll have to see the power of rejuvenation, because if rejuvenation is going to be too powerful, you might be just spamming rejuve all the time. But again, spell power is only going to be determined really close to the next expansion launch, so don't look at spell coefficients of the theory crafting just yet. I'm excited about this. I was always a fan of it, unless it becomes a really degenerate rejuve spam all the time with no consequences. Let's hope not. Besides that, what is new? What is completely new to this tree? And that is going to be this here. This whole line here is a new build for Resto Druid. It's a new complete playstyle. Again, I don't want to say complete new playstyle, but it is emphasis on Life Bloom. So you can see here verdancy. When Life Bloom blooms, up to 3 targets within your efflorescence are healed for a specific amount. And you're like, okay, efflorescence healing, it is based on positioning. I don't really like it. If people are not stacked, I don't like it, whatever. But then you kind of go down into a possible synergies here. So you pick up things like Spring Blossoms. You pick up things like Budding Leaves. Life Bloom's healing is increased by 3% each time it heals up to 45%. Also increases Life Bloom's final bloom amount. And then you look at things like photosynthesis, where if you put Life Bloom on yourself or an ally, while your Life Bloom is on an ally, your periodic heals on them have 4% chance to cause it to bloom. So now this blooming effect might interact with verdancy, where your Life Bloom blooms, heals people within your efflorescence. Then your Budding Leaves, what does it mean by Life Bloom's final bloom amount? Does that work with photosynthesis? And then you look at the fact that you have Undergrowth, where you can have 2 Life Blooms active at the same time. And then how is this going to interact with something like Circle Life and Death? You can see where I'm going with this. This has, again, I'm not testing this. I'm not testing the synergies here, because all of these things can change, or they might be bugged and they're not implemented in the beta yet. If I'm reading the tooltips, if I'm looking at the intention the Blizzard is trying to do, there could be some insane synergy here. And don't forget about the fact that Life Bloom has the chance of proccing clear casting, which makes your regrowth free, or regrowth costs no mana, which also clear casting regrowth heals for an additional 30%. Let's just have a peek preview of this. And just to showcase the craziness of this build, I haven't really tested all the synergies, because there is so many possible synergies that might be evident later on. We are reliant on efflorescence, and it does have a position requirement, so if people are spread, it's not going to work as well. But efflorescence with Spring Blossoms applies some of the Life Blooms on the targets. Again, you're looking for verdancy procs. Again, you can see it right here, it procced. So there's a lot of passive healing that's generated from the people around or inside your efflorescence, and you can kind of go in DPS, maybe Feral Affinity. Again, I'm saying Affinity, maybe go into your Feral form and do some damage and let the healing and let the passive healing do all the work. Now, I mentioned there's a lot of synergies that I haven't even looked at because there's so many different synergies here. And even if they're not existent right now, it's possible that they're going to be changed in the future. The intent is clear. Blizzard is trying to provide a new gameplay, a new passive healing gameplay that is kind of based on the positioning of players. Maybe if you're doing a raid boss where everyone's kind of stacked up and there's a lot of continuous AoE damage happening, this feels like you saw the numbers. They're just flying everywhere. Again, it is going to be based on spell power and how Blizzard is going to balance these spells. But that's the only thing that's really and truly new in the Resto Druid kind of node or talent build. This is completely new. Again, there's talents that are new, but they don't really change your gameplay all that much. I'm looking at Nature's Vigil here. I'm looking at other kind of talents as well. This is something that is going to change your gameplay and possibly create a new passive healing gameplay, maybe even in Mythic Plus. Again, let me know how you feel about this change. We're adding some of the new and beloved legendaries from the previous expansions. We're giving you a new playstyle that could possibly be used in Mythic Plus and raids. We'll have to see how it's going to be balanced. And then for the people who really enjoyed Shadowlands gameplay as a Resto Druid, you still have your favorites, especially if you're someone who's pushing Mythic Plus, because I still feel a lot of Resto Druids will look for alternatives or nodes that give you damage as well. And you have things like Convoke, which you can use in your forms to provide damage. You can have Adaptive Swarm, which provides decent amount of overall healing and decent amount of damage. And you can have Circle Life and Death, which you could argue does provide you with more damage, but it gives you a really GCD heavy gameplay, which you might like or hate, but it is still a very popular in things like Mythic Plus and Shadowlands. You have Unending Growth, which historically has been a strong raid legendary. Again, the 4-set bonus is making a comeback. Innervate, improved Innervate, Memory of Mother Tree is making a comeback. Convoke with improved Convoke, which I haven't tested fully. This tree is stacked with possible or possibilities that could be very, very strong if you consider the power of these spells from Shadowlands. We'll have to see how the power of these spells is going to change. My biggest issue with the previous iteration of Resto Druid tree was that it has all the cool abilities from Shadowlands, and it has a lot of these interesting combinations that you could have or you couldn't have before, but you could have now in Dragonflight. But it had nothing that was really new. It had nothing that was, wow, I haven't seen this before. This could be a really cool combination. And now with these changes, I think Blizzard did just enough. They made just enough changes to make people happy. And whether that's going to be people who wanted something new or whether that's going to be people who wanted the good old Resto Druid back. I think they actually are winning here with these changes because you will have multiple, or hopefully you will have multiple combinations here. Maybe you'll use the double life bloom in certain raid situations, where people are stacked. Maybe you'll go with the good old DPS Resto Druid type of build where you pick up every node that provides you damage and healing in Mythic Plus. And that's going to provide you with still a very interesting and compelling gameplay. And again, if you enjoy Resto Druid in Shadowlands, I can almost guarantee you're going to enjoy Resto Druid in Dragonflight. Again, I mentioned this throughout the video that all of these balancing changes can change literally a day before the expansion is released, and only then you will know which build is going to be the best way to go, because I really don't want to play Balance Affinity or Boomkin form in something like Mythic Plus environment because I just don't like it. I'm just going to have to wait to see which one is going to be better later down the line when we get closer to the expansion release. But overall, I'm really excited about this. I think this is a solid talent tree, and I think Blizzard could actually release it the way it is, and I think majority of people would be relatively happy. So I could actually close the book on Resto Druid right now and say it is a very solid healer that provides a lot of fun, but we don't know what the build or the gameplay is going to be until the very end. Again, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next guide.